I watched my grandma literally die in front of my eyes. Symbolical meanings to life. Symbolical meanings to life. There's a quote that my younger sister said, and it goes like this: age gracefully. As times go and the body decays, what happens to the soul? So much of my life I've been wrapped up in the opinions of others that I lost the identity of me, and this form was created without even knowing. For the power of God lives within me. So many want to get to know, so many want to get to see. If I barely know me, how can I let you try to understand me? My grandma passed away in front of my eyes, and on the last prayer that we prayed on her soul, my faith and my religion, and my family's religion and my family's faith, put things into perspective here. Last Eid, last year, I got her a blue rose, a singular blue rose. That day that I gave her that blue rose, she was wearing a white dress with blue roses on it. She had a smile on her face. The rose. She told me that my dad got her that dress, and then that rose meant something to her. And I didn't think much of it until maybe 3-4 months ago. I go to her house and I see that rose and it's still alive. And I remember telling myself that day and then, there has to be some sort of meaning that it's still alive. How strong and resilient my grandma was. And that sounded foreign because I never really understood the person in front of me. I never understood her favorite color. I never understood her favorite book. I never understood anything that made my grandma a person. I knew her for being my grandma, a lady that cooks, a lady I have to say hi to, a lady that I just couldn't ask questions to. And I noticed every time I would go up there and just ask her personal questions, people would look at me like I was the odd one out. But every now and then I would sit there and I would sneak in a couple of questions. And I learned to realize that my grandma never learned how to read. No one's ever taught her how to read. And one day she was sitting there watching this thing on TV of, I think it was like people telling the future. And she was just so into it as a child. And her eyes were so glowing and brilliant. And fast forward to the day that she died. That morning, and I'm going to use the word mourning here in particular because we are mourning our death or celebrating, either or. That morning, I told my dad I was going to visit her. I was like holding it off for so long in my head. I just didn't want to face the reality of the fact. So that morning, I wake up, had the intent of visiting her. Got her a rose that was red. I put on some red sneakers that day too, and I walked. I got there and I seen her and she looked like she was full of life. Gave it a rose, gave her a kiss on her head, and she smiled and laughed, and she even said, put it with the rose so it doesn't, put it with the other rose, the blue one, so it doesn't die. I briefly sat down and we started talking. The room was very, very hot, and a lot of people were in fear, not knowing what to do. We sat down, we started talking, and I told her I wanted a candy. She gave me a butterscotch candy, one of the Welchers, the caramel ones. When I was a child, she gave me the same one. That was the go-to candy from my grandma's house, was those Welchers. And then out of nowhere, she sat there and she was like, I need to use the bathroom. So we helped her get up. And she took her last walk. She went to the bathroom and she made it back onto the couch that she spent most of her life on. the couch in front of the TV. And I remember helping her getting out of the chair when she was returning back from the bathroom to putting her on the couch. And it was me and my uncle. It was me and my uncle. And I remember looking at my uncle trying to ask him for a sense of direction. But he was in so much fear that he didn't know, and he panicked. He was like, there's no one downstairs to help her. And I looked at him, I was like, I'm here and I'm capable of helping her. And we put her back on the couch. At this point, my grandma was exhausted. I felt the room's energy so off that I kissed her foot, went into a different room, spoke to my dad, and I told him I was going to head out, and he told me it was a good idea. I get home without really knowing why. I called my mom, and she said she's gone. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel sorrow. I felt relieved and happy for her to no longer be in pain. So I got on my bike and I made it to her house. Now, my grandma lives on the street that I was born and raised on. Raised. She's never left that apartment. She spent her whole life there. That block in particular has a lot of symbolical meaning to me. So we're taking the bike ride home from my house to my grandma's house. And as I'm making the turn onto my grandma's house, all I hear is Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah. It just clicked in me. Something clicked in me. The next day, we go to the mosque for the final prayer. Rewind a little bit. We go back to the same day where my grandma passed away, and we're looking at her. Or I came to see her after it then finally see her, and I break down, and she was such at peace, and I would just hold her foot and squeeze it and feel the force within her foot. And as I'm closing my eyes now, I see her face. Like, I don't really know how to explain a lot of the things that I see or I visualize. It's hard. It's hard to connect. Because anything other than truth is manipulation. And if you're not speaking out of truth, who are you? Or where are you? I don't really have a strong connection with my family for personal reasons of my own. For the trials and tribulations that I faced as a human and the sacrifices I've made to be where I'm at. The next day, I make it to my grandma's final goodbyes. And I'm already feeling so much feelings of anger, remorse, regret, shame, guilt. And I just had this face of like on sight. Me and my dad got into an altercation in the car for reasons I don't want to mention. I love my father with all my heart because my dad is one of my superheroes. However, my father is my father. One thing they always say is you got to prove yourself to the man in front of you. The concept of masculinity, femininity, and everything else that has no significance, because my dad is the man of all men. Everyone in that mosque said hi to my father. My grandma is the glue to the family. She passed away. Next best thing, in my opinion, is my father. It's sad because when you love something so much, you tend to suffocate it and kill it, for you don't want to hurt it. But you love it, that it dies because it can't receive your love. Because your love is to protect and nourish. And on the path of forgiveness, it's very long. It's very dark. It's very lonely. However, it's very fun. Because you find you unlock the true potential of yourself. And a lot of the old narratives of old people and old circles and egos no longer serve. For ego is good when properly used. When ego is properly used, ego is good. I've been racing this thing called life. In the Quran, it says heaven lays underneath the mother's foot. However, I do know a lot about what I feel. And I don't mean this with no disrespect of saying that my feelings are the only thing that matter. No. I am connected to a source that feels. Doesn't mean I'm purely right in my actions. And I think for anyone watching this, trying to rationalize where I'm going with this, it's going to fully make sense. Trust. The day of my grandma's funeral, I see an old cousin of mine. And this is the only cousin of mine that put a smile on my face. Because within every family, you find black sheeps. People that have been through pain and people that's been outcasted and people that just see people and love people. The cousin that I've seen there that made me smile had an older brother that passed away, unfortunately. May God rest his soul. Allah yarhamah. He was a good guy. But that's besides the point now, is it? Or it can add to the story's value. Who knows? But I had a talk with my cousin and I told him, what's up with you and why did you gain? I had a talk with my cousin and because he looked so different. And I asked him, I was like, what's going on with your life? Like, tell me. I'm really curious. And he sat there and he was like, well, COVID and this and that. And I cut off all that bullshit and I stared him in the eyes and I was like, I forgive you. I forgive you for anything that you've done to me. And I think a lot of people forgive you for what you've done to them. And just start living now in the present. So much of my fighter side came from a place of me being vulnerable and being casted the outcast for being so vulnerable and telling me to shut my feelings because someone told them to shut theirs. And I'm at a point now where I'm content with what is. And if what is means it is, then it is. But going back to my grandma and the day of her final prayer, I walk in. At first, I don't realize much because I'm in my own little head. And like I said, I wasn't really talking to my father because of the car ride. And I get there and I look across and I see my dad in a state of distress. But at first, I didn't really want to entertain it. And then I kept seeing him getting up and getting down. And remember, my dad has one leg that's shorter than the other. So the longer I sat there seeing him doing that, I kind of just like went over and I sat next to him. And I kind of just zoned out the room. In the corner of my ears, I would hear people having conversation as the person's reading Quran. And as the person's reading the Quran and I'm hearing the conversations, in my mind, I'm just saying astaghfirullah 10 times louder. And then I go in this trance state where I just start going into deep visualization and I'm taking all this energy in this room. And I look down and I see blue roses. And next to me, I feel the sadness of my dad. And I start hysterical crying. like ballistically just crying my soul out. Because it held such beautiful meaning. Knowing that my grandma had so much joy in her life from a simple act of a blue rose and a blue rose. Like on the shirt and on the in this picture. This picture right there. Look at that smile. Right now, the people that are texting me is my family because my dad is currently in Lebanon burying my grandma. So, love you all. Oh, fuck. Talk about resilience. Talk about character. Talk about family. Talk about strength. Talk about the reasons why we are living. We're living to feel. We're living to be. Oh, fuck, man. No shame, no guilt behind anything. I really want this video to be a message of, for myself mainly right now, to live. Don't delete this. Keep this up. And I love you, man. I love you for sharing this and being vulnerable. And the guy that I'm looking at now is not the guy that I'm seeing on the day to day. I think more people want to get to know this person, so it feels foreign, it feels strange, but it feels true.